Are you thinking of moving to Charlotte? Everyone always wants to know, what are the big differences between North and South Carolina real estate, specifically with new construction? So today we're gonna go through the 6 things to be on the lookout for. And am I the only one that before very recently didn't know what BOLO was? Either way, we're gonna go through all the differences between North and South Carolina real estate. So tune in so you can learn all about North, South. We are going to dive really deep. So the first thing to be on the lookout for when you're comparing North and South Carolina new construction homes is home prices. Looks can be deceiving. Some builders will show the actual home price with everything built into it, and that way you know that that is the price you're paying and it's not gonna go up. And some builders will actually show the base price, and then you know that you're gonna be trickling up or really bumping up on the price as you build out or pick some of the options in those homes. So you really want to see, basically what I'm getting at is the main question to ask is this the base price or is this the final price and the actual sale price? Some builders will tell you that it's the base price, and if that's the case, then you want to make sure that you know what is the average amount over the base price that buyers are paying. Then if it's the final price, you know exactly what you're going to be buying that house for. And when it comes to North versus South Carolina, a lot of builders in South Carolina are going to post the base price because they offer tons of options. We just met with True Homes and they have 50 different floor plans. They've got thousands of different options. They have 64 different backsplashes you can choose from. So chances are the price that they're showing that you could buy the home for is actually the base price. And so what you need to figure out is how much more is the average person spending on top of that base price. That way you can work that into your budget. South Carolina, you're gonna see a lot of that. You're gonna see a lot of base prices being advertised, and then you can customize tons of things. In North Carolina, in Charlotte, a lot of the times you're gonna see the final price and the actual sale price, because what happens is in South Carolina, a lot of the builders will actually allow you to customize tons of stuff. They want you to be able to make this feel like a custom home. Whereas in Charlotte, they don't have the time, they don't have the margins, they don't have the ability to be able to allow most buyers to customize things. And sure, there are a lot of good neighborhoods where you can do that, but in South Carolina, it's way more common. So if you want to build more of a custom, semi-custom home, South Carolina might be better for you. However, coming back to the first point that we're on the lookout for here is pricing and how it may not be exactly as it seems. So one other thing that could be hidden in there is HOA dues. The fees and the dues for HOA, which is the Homeowners Association, are gonna differ based on every community. And shockingly, we're standing in Edgewater right now, and I'm sure as I'm talking, Joey's gonna start throwing up some great B-roll of how awesome this neighborhood is with the marina, the pickleball courts, pools, the 18-hole golf course, everything that they've got here. You would think normally a neighborhood like this would have a huge HOA fee, but actually everything here is super reasonable and actually on the lower end of HOA dues. Some of the neighborhoods in Charlotte, as you start getting closer to the city, you start getting more amenities, you are gonna be paying a lot. So when it comes to HOA dues, be on the lookout for what you're getting and how much you're spending. The other reason why it's super important to know what you're spending is that plays into your debt to income ratio with the lender. So if you're getting a loan on the house, you need to make sure that you understand what the HOA dues are so that the lender can work that into your monthly payment. Because believe it or not, the HOA can actually foreclose on you if you don't pay. So we kind of joke about it at the closing table. I mean, it wouldn't be funny if it happened, but at the closing table, a lot of the attorneys will say, if you have a problem with the HOA, pay and then fight them. Don't fight them and withhold payment because they can still foreclose on you. So I know that's a little bit of a tangent, has nothing to really do with South Carolina versus Charlotte new construction, but just a little tidbit I thought you would want to know. Now, let's get into the second thing. Oh, and also before we even get into the second point, this video is gonna go into some of the little things that I knew nothing about before moving to Charlotte 11 years ago, and you likely wouldn't know either. So be sure to tune in because we're also gonna go into a lot of the issues that you may run into before you move here. And lastly, speaking of issues, we have all kinds of videos about frequently asked questions so that you can make sure you avoid any issues. We talk about common mistakes that buyers make. We've got a video for that. So be sure to check out all of our videos on our Living in Charlotte channel. Now, let's get back into it. So the second thing to be on the lookout for, or as some like to say, BOLO, is property taxes. And I'll tell you, we'll start right up front. South Carolina wins. South Carolina, every day of the week will be better for property taxes than North Carolina will be, and better than Charlotte will be. There's a catch though. South Carolina is great if you live in South Carolina. If you're an investor and you're investing in a property in the state of South Carolina, the property taxes aren't going to be as great. And that's why there's not as many investors. And look, if you think about it logically, it makes sense. You have a lot of great, attractive cities that people like to invest in and travel to. So you have Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Hilton Head, all kinds of different cities that are very attractive to invest in South Carolina, which is why they've raised taxes for investors or anyone who's not primarily living in that home. Now, between South Carolina and Charlotte, again, property taxes are going to be way more favorable in South Carolina. So that's a huge draw for people. If they're thinking budget conscious and making sure that you are not over investing and not paying a ton in taxes and insurance and principal and interest, so your full payment, you want to actually look towards South Carolina. And that's what's driven a lot of people to Fort Mill, Rock Hill, Lancaster, York County, Chester. All of these little towns and areas that are in South Carolina that are still close to Charlotte, all of which that are truthfully within an hour of Charlotte and an hour of the airport and easy to travel to. That's why people have been looking at them. Now, the average property tax rate in Mecklenburg County is 0.75% to about 1%. So compared to South Carolina, where it's about 0.5% to 0.6%. So you can see Charlotte, especially in Mecklenburg County, is every single day of the week going to be more expensive. It's going to be more expensive for property taxes there than it is in South Carolina, which is a huge draw to South Carolina real estate, especially for people looking for new construction. So let's break this down and play with some real numbers. A $600,000 house in Charlotte or Mecklenburg County, those taxes would be anywhere from $5,000 to $6,000-ish. In South Carolina, those property taxes are like $3,000. So almost half of what it would be in Mecklenburg County. Now, here's where it gets tricky though. If you're buying a house in South Carolina, like we said earlier, if you're buying a house in South Carolina and you're planning to use it as an investment property and you don't intend on living there, you're going to be paying 6% and higher because there's additional fees associated with that for your taxes. And if you're intending on living there and using it as a primary residence, 4% tax rate. If you're buying in Charlotte, you are, no matter what, whether you're an investor or a primary homeowner, going to be paying the same tax rate. So it will be higher than South Carolina, but doesn't matter what you intend on doing with the property, your rate is going to be the same. South Carolina, it depends on what you want to do with the property, but your rate, no matter what, is going to still be cheaper. And look, if you're planning on living in a home, that extra $3,000 in savings, that's real money every single month. So that's a huge reason why people do trend a little more towards South Carolina. To put a bow on this, second thing to be on the lookout for is property taxes. South Carolina is going to win every single day of the week. God, I think I said that like 3 times. But either way, it's a phenomenal place to be for property taxes. Before we continue, I'd like to give you all a warm welcome to the Living in Charlotte channel. We're here with the top relocation team in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we provide videos every week for you to understand the ins and outs of the Charlotte real estate market. So be sure to take some notes and don't be afraid to pause the video as you go. Because of how spread out this city is, one thing that we've noticed is a lot of our buyers have heard about a specific neighborhood or maybe a specific street, and their dream home is situated right on that street. And it may not be possible to find that exact home on that street. So one of the things that our team has done, and I personally did, was I invested in one of the most high-tech artificial intelligence tools to help you narrow down exactly where we might be able to find some homes that may not be on the market yet with sellers who are willing to sell. If it ends up not being the perfect house for you, do you have to buy it? No, you don't. But it's one of the many tools that sets our team apart from everyone else in all of Charlotte, North Carolina. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna hop on a Zoom call, pull up a map, and go through the specific neighborhoods and streets that are gonna fit your needs. And more importantly, we're gonna cross off all the ones that just simply won't be a fit. So the third thing to be on the lookout for, or as my favorite new saying, BOLO, is builder incentives. And you're gonna typically find a lot more builder incentives in South Carolina compared to Charlotte. Why is that? Because South Carolina builders are going to want to draw buyers there. Charlotte has its own draw, and if you want to see some of the reasons why people like to move to Charlotte, feel free to watch literally any of our videos, except for the one video about the reasons why not to move to Charlotte. But take a look at any of those videos and you'll be able to see why people are attracted to Mecklenburg County and attracted to living in Charlotte. That is why builders in Charlotte, North Carolina aren't offering as many incentives or as strong of incentives as builders in South Carolina are. So when you're buying in South Carolina, be sure to ask what incentives there are. Be sure to find out if there are good incentives. Typically, we're seeing builders in Charlotte offering, I don't know, anywhere between $5,000 and $20,000 in incentives, whereas builders in South Carolina, $10,000 to $50,000 in incentives. Now, that may be closing costs, that may be seller credit, which are interchangeable terms. That might be refrigerator, washer, and dryer. It might be blinds. It might mean they'll do a free screened-in porch. Maybe for a builder like True Homes, which, look, we're in the Edgewater community. This is a super customizable community. A builder like True Homes in a community like this, maybe their incentives are, when you go to the design center, you can use $50,000 or $10,000 on them. So you can get some cool upgrades. You can get that nicer backsplash. You can get the nicer cabinetry or countertops. There's all kinds of ways that you can slice and dice all the incentives. And at the end of the day, you're typically going to find more incentives from builders in South Carolina than you are in Charlotte. So the fourth thing to be on the lookout for is traffic and commute times. And is your life gonna suck because of traffic? And I'll tell you what, if you're buying in South Carolina, there is a high likelihood that your traffic and commute is going to blow. There's gonna be more traffic. 77 and 485 have major bottlenecks, especially around rush hour, which, look, I mean, that's why we're in the golf cart heading back to the model home down here in Lancaster so that we can go fight rush hour traffic on a Friday afternoon to get home, which is gonna be a blast. But that being said, there's a lot of pros and a lot of cons to Charlotte versus South Carolina. You could still have tons of rush hour traffic that you're going to be dealing with when you're commuting in Charlotte. But the reason why a lot of people are willing to move to South Carolina, even though they might have a ton of traffic, and if you're commuting every single day, it would probably suck, is because most people are working remote now. And so because you only have to go to, or hybrid, right? Some people only have to go to the office 2 or 3 days a week instead of 5 days a week. Some people don't have to go to the office at all. Some people are once a month that they have to go into the office. So you can see there's a lot of reasons why people are willing to live further where they may have a lot of traffic. And look, there's no way around it. We each have over an hour drive back home into the center of Charlotte, and it's gonna blow, right? But at the end of the day, a lot of people like living down here because you get way more bang for your buck, and which we'll get into that. But at the end of the day, when it comes to traffic, it's something that you seriously need to take into consideration. Because if you're used to doing an hour commute each way, maybe this would be fine for you. If you're used to a 10, 20, 30-minute commute, depending where your office is, South Carolina may not be the best place for you to look. You may want to be in Charlotte. And so this is actually probably one of the first ones where Charlotte is going to be a better option than South Carolina, depending on what your commute looks like and what your tolerance for the commute can look like. So we're gonna head to the model home. We gotta drop this golf cart off, get back into town. And look, huge thanks to True Homes for letting us even borrow this golf cart and showing us the Edgewater community, because this community is insane. It is so nice. If I worked remote, I would absolutely live here because they've got a lake, they've got a marina, they're building a restaurant, they're gonna build bars in here too. They have a full golf course. They're gonna build an executive golf course. I mean, like, you never have to leave. So we're gonna drop this golf cart off and we're gonna head into Charlotte and we're gonna get the rest of this video done. So I'll see you in Charlotte. My name is Andy GRIESINGER. My team and I get calls, texts, emails, and DMs from people like you every day who are thinking about moving to Charlotte, North Carolina. And whether you're looking to move here in a week from now, a month from now, a year or 2 years from now, whatever it is, we would absolutely love to help and we would love to hear from you. Now, if this is your first time on our Living in Charlotte channel, be sure to subscribe and tap the bell for notifications so you can be the first to know everything there is to know about the Charlotte, North Carolina real estate market. So next up is schools. And for some of you, that's going to be super important. And for some of you, it won't matter at all. And for those of you who don't care about that at all, maybe stick to the bars and the breweries in South End and don't even worry about South Carolina. But for those of you that do care about South Carolina and schools in particular, South Carolina is kind of a hidden gem when it comes to schools. Fort Mill, 𝐾𝐿, and some of these surrounding areas have incredible school districts. And they're funded by taxpayer dollars. They are super intentional about trying to invest in these school systems and school programs. There's new buildings that have lower student to teacher ratios so that students get a lot more attention from the teachers and the people on the staff at these schools. Whereas in Charlotte, you do have some amazing schools. You've got Myers Park, you have Providence, Audrey Kell, a handful of different schools in the Charlotte area, but you also have a lot of schools that are very overcrowded and underfunded. I almost said undercrowded and overfunded, but I feel like that would actually be a really good thing. There are a lot of overcrowded schools in Charlotte that don't have enough funding. And so it is very much a mixed bag. So if schools are important to you and you want to be in Charlotte and not South Carolina, there are a lot of different areas that you're probably going to want to just eliminate from your search simply because of the school district and their ratings. I always recommend to buyers, if schools are important, two things. One, make sure if schools are important that you live as close to that school as possible, because none of us can guarantee any redistricting, what that will look like, when it will happen, or if it will happen. And if you buy a house right on the outskirts of that school district that you really want to be in, and then a year or two later, they shift it in and you get bumped out into a different school district, sorry, that sucks. And we want to avoid that. So living closer to the school, where clearly if they move the lines around, you're gonna be able to keep your kids there. That is a huge rule of thumb. The second, go to some of the different websites that will actually tell you school ratings, some of the teacher ratings, some of the different standardized testing ratings, all of those kinds of things. And the two best websites that we like are School Digger and Great Schools. There's also a couple different sites that you can use for Mecklenburg County with CMS that will actually show you ratings as well. And I like to cross-reference all of those because if they're all showing 8s or 9s for a high school, you're probably in the clear. But if one of them shows an 8 and the other two are 4, something's up. Be sure to look at the different school systems, school ratings, and understand that South Carolina is a huge draw to buyers because of the schools, which is also going to drive a lot of competition. And look, we've got a lot of videos talking about the competition in Charlotte and surrounding areas. And so feel free to look at those videos because you'll see, and surprisingly enough, the schools are a major driving force for some of this competition. The last option is always private schools and alternative options. There are charter schools, there's magnet schools, and there's private schools scattered all throughout Charlotte and through South Carolina too. So if that's in the cards for you, which look, it's not for everybody, whether they want to or not, or whether they can afford to or not, at the end of the day, if that's an option, it's worth entertaining because you're gonna wanna be close to those schools too, because if you're dropping your kids off to school every single day, that plays into the last point about commute times, because if you're commuting to the schools, commuting home, commuting to work, commuting back home, going to school, going back home, you're spending a lot of time in the car. And look, I'm no car guru, but if that's the case, maybe think about an electric car, maybe an EV, maybe a hybrid that's a plug-in, something like that. Otherwise, you're just guzzling gas. You could end up driving a lot, depending on what school your kids go to, how far you live from that school, and where your job is. So these are all things that you want to take into consideration. And again, for those of you that don't have kids, you want to know the best breweries in town and you want to be close to those and walkable to those, tune into our most walkable neighborhoods in South Park video that we're getting ready to film literally right after this, because we're going to talk about all of the different places that you can walk to depending on the neighborhood you live in. And for some people, that's more important than schools. Now, back to the school conversation for those of you that are still sticking around, which first of all, thank you for sticking around this long. I always appreciate that. Bottom line, Fort Mill and 𝐾𝐿 and some of the South Carolina schools are phenomenal. And they are a huge reason why a lot of people are drawn to South Carolina. So don't overlook that if you're choosing between Charlotte or another city within South Carolina. All right, so the last thing we're gonna go through today when we're talking about the differences between buying in Charlotte versus South Carolina is hidden fees, HOA dues, things like that, stuff that people don't really talk about very much. And so what you need to think about is in South Carolina, the property taxes are much lower. And so builders are offsetting some of those fees that they could earn due to that by having higher HOA dues, higher capital contribution fees, higher fees in general. And so what that can look like is some of these big communities. I mean, there are some huge communities down in South Carolina. They'll have a pretty normal, relatively small HOA dues that you'll owe every single month, but then they'll also have memberships that you'll have to subscribe to in order to have access to clubhouses and different amenities and features of the neighborhood, which could be another $100, $200, $300 a month. So when you're talking to a builder, or if you're talking to an agent who's helping you find something in South Carolina, make sure you're asking what the HOA dues are, what that goes towards, and if there's anything in addition that you need to be paying for while living in that community. Another one of the hidden fees that you'll want to take into consideration is private sewer and private water. In South Carolina, some of the areas can be a little more rural than Charlotte. Now, neighborhoods like Edgewater with 4,000 homes isn't going to be super rural. You're going to have water and sewer that you can access through the county. When you're living out on an acre or 5 acres or 10 acres of land with a nice, beautiful house that's super private, chances are you're going to be on well and you're going to be on a septic tank. Both of those come with fees. Obviously, you're going to save on the monthly water bill because you won't actually have a water bill, but you're going to have maintenance of the well. You're also not going to have a bill from the county or city like you would in Charlotte for sewer, but you're gonna have to upkeep and maintain the septic tank. And I'll tell you what, if something happens to that, it's pretty Was that a good joke? I don't know. Ultimately, if you have a septic tank, it may cost more money in maintenance, whereas if you're on city sewer or county sewer, you're not gonna have any of those fees, but you will be paying every single time you flush the toilet. Whereas with a septic tank, you don't. Some things that you want to take into consideration, things to think about if you've never grown up or lived in a home with a septic tank or a well, it could be very different. A lot of people really like it. When we have outages or blackouts, or when we have things going on where the water gets shut down in an entire county, you don't have to worry about that because you're not losing water because it's a private well. So certainly some pros and cons to that, and there's different expenses, whether it's monthly or whether it's annual for upkeep, that you'll have to take into consideration when you're looking at the differences between South Carolina and Charlotte. And the last piece with this, hidden fees and hidden things to think about, is just appreciation and resale opportunities. A lot of people move to Charlotte and are drawn to living in Charlotte versus living in South Carolina. But that being said, for as many people are wanting to live in Charlotte, there are probably just as many people looking to live in South Carolina. But the key is making sure that you take good care of your home, your upkeep and your maintenance are up to date with the home, and that you have a nice house that's maybe walkable in a good location, close to things, whatever it may be, because that is going to ultimately boost your appreciation potential and your resale opportunity. Because not only is appreciation and resale and all these buzzwords important, at the end of the day, when you go to sell, you're going to want to sell quickly and for the most amount of money. And if you have the right house in the right location, in the right condition, with the right agent marketing that house, you will be able to do that. One of the reasons why we are the #1 relocation team in Charlotte, North Carolina, is that we love when people reach out to us. We make a full plan for your visit to make it as effective and efficient as possible so that you can see for yourself if this city is right for you. And I mean, I know I'm biased, but I think it might be. So if you're ready to explore everything that Charlotte has to offer, be sure to check out some of our other videos and drop a comment below if you have any questions about this video. We're always sharing new tips about the Charlotte, North Carolina real estate market, and we would love to help you find the perfect home in this amazing city. Our contact information is in the description below, so be sure to write down our phone number and email so that you can text us or email us to set up that introduction call. That way we can hop on Zoom and develop a plan for you. So what are you waiting for? Let's start your Charlotte adventure today.